The psychological arms race. To understand why MKUltra expanded the way it did, you have to step back into the atmosphere of the Cold War. This was not just a race for weapons. It was a race for influence, for ideology, for the human mind itself. After World War II, the global balance of power shifted rapidly. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers, locked in tension that touched every continent. Nuclear weapons created the threat of physical destruction, but psychological warfare created something more subtle.
Fear.
Reports began circulating about prisoners of war allegedly subjected to brainwashing. Confessions broadcast on foreign radio waves. Soldiers who appeared to denounce their own governments. Intelligence agencies interpreted these events as evidence of advanced psychological manipulation. Whether exaggerated or misunderstood, the perception alone was powerful. If an enemy could control thought, if loyalty could be altered, if beliefs could be rewritten, then traditional defenses were no longer enough. The battlefield had moved inside the human mind. This belief fueled urgency. Intelligence communities began asking not only how to resist psychological manipulation, but how to master it first. In that climate, experimentation felt strategic. The logic was simple. If they are developing these techniques, we cannot afford ignorance. But urgency narrows perspective. What might have seemed unethical in peacetime began to look necessary in a world defined by existential threat. The arms race was no longer just about missiles or bombers. It was about resilience, interrogation, persuasion, and influence. Research into behavior, stress tolerance, and altered states became intertwined with national security. Universities, private foundations, and research centers sometimes became indirect participants through funding streams that masked their origin. Grants appeared academic. Objectives seemed scientific. But behind the scenes, certain projects aligned with intelligence priorities. This blending of academia and intelligence blurred boundaries. When research serves two masters, knowledge and strategy, ethical clarity can fade. The psychological arms race was built on uncertainty. Intelligence reports are rarely complete. Rumors can become assumptions. Assumptions can become policy. In the absence of full information, worst-case scenarios dominate planning. And worst-case scenarios justify extreme preparation. The idea that an adversary possessed advanced mind control capabilities may have been overstated. But policymakers could not risk being unprepared if it were true. That fear transformed hypothetical threats into concrete programs. MKUltra became part of that preparation. It was framed as defensive research. Understanding psychological limits was seen as a way to protect agents, resist interrogation, and safeguard national interests. Yet in trying to prevent manipulation, the program crossed into it. That paradox defines the psychological arms race. To defend freedom, institutions risked undermining it. The Cold War mindset amplified this tension. Every technological advancement by one side prompted escalation by the other. Nuclear capability begot more nuclear capability. Surveillance begot countersurveillance. Psychological research followed the same pattern. If one side studied persuasion, the other intensified its efforts. If rumors suggested breakthroughs, urgency increased. Fear feeds momentum. Momentum reduces hesitation. Hesitation is where ethics often reside. The psychological arms race also reshaped culture. Popular media reflected anxieties about hidden influence, sleeper agents, and invisible control. Fiction mirrored intelligence fears. Public imagination absorbed the idea that minds could be manipulated without awareness. That cultural backdrop reinforced policy decisions. When society fears invisible threats, it becomes more tolerant of invisible responses. But invisible programs operate beyond scrutiny. The architects of MKUltra may have believed they were operating within this competitive landscape responsibly. They may have seen themselves as guardians in a dangerous era. Yet the competition itself created blind spots. In focusing on what an enemy might do, less attention was paid to what should never be done. The race dynamic fosters comparison rather than reflection. If an adversary is rumored to cross ethical lines, pressure builds to do the same or to go further. The danger is not only in the actions taken.
It is in the mindset that justifies them.
The psychological arms race did not produce definitive mind control mastery. It did, however, demonstrate how fear of being outmatched can drive institutions toward ethically unstable ground. And this pattern is not confined to the Cold War. Technological races continue today in artificial intelligence, data analytics, digital influence. The tools differ, but the underlying logic remains familiar. If we do not develop it, someone else will. That logic can accelerate innovation. It can also accelerate compromise. MKUltra stands as an example of what happens when competitive pressure overrides transparency. The program was not born solely from curiosity. It was born from rivalry, from the belief that survival depended on psychological advantage. In the end, the Cold War concluded without confirmed proof of perfected mind control on either side. The feared breakthrough never materialized in the way Intelli. Culture, media, and the shadow of influence. Long after congressional hearings ended and documents were boxed away, MKUltra did not disappear. It shifted from classified archives into public imagination. When the truth surfaced in the 1970s, it collided with a society already wrestling with distrust fueled by political scandals, war, and revelations about covert operations. MKUltra became more than a program. It became a symbol of hidden power, of invisible influence, of the unsettling idea that control could exist beneath the surface of normal life. Media absorbed that symbol quickly. Films began exploring themes of manipulated memory, secret conditioning, and psychological control. Stories featured characters whose identities were not fully their own. Plots revolved around hidden programming triggered by coded phrases. Fiction blurred with recently revealed history. The public did not need full documentation to feel the impact. The idea alone was powerful. If a government had once experimented in secrecy, what else might remain undisclosed? This question spread beyond MKUltra itself. It fed a broader cultural current: suspicion toward institutions, curiosity about covert operations, fascination with classified files. Documentaries, books, and investigative journalism continued revisiting the program, each adding layers to the narrative. Over time, MKUltra evolved into shorthand for hidden manipulation. In popular culture, the name became almost mythic. It appeared in music lyrics, novels, television shows. Sometimes referenced accurately, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes transformed into something far more dramatic than historical evidence supports. That transformation reveals something important. When secrecy meets imagination, the gap between fact and fiction widens. MKUltra created a vacuum. Destroyed files left unanswered questions. Limited accountability left unresolved tension. In that vacuum, speculation grew. Some theories expanded far beyond documented reality. Others intertwined MKUltra with unrelated events. The program became a cornerstone in larger narratives about hidden elites and total societal control. Not all of those claims are supported by evidence. But the persistence of such theories tells us something deeper. Trust, once damaged, does not easily return. When institutions admit to secret experimentation, even if limited in scope, it plants doubt that extends beyond the original program. Media both reflects and amplifies that doubt. Investigative reporters played a critical role in uncovering MKUltra. Without persistent journalism, fragments might have remained buried. Transparency emerged because individuals asked questions repeatedly. Yet media also sensationalizes. Headlines condense complexity. Dramatic angles attract attention. Nuance can be lost. The cultural memory of MKUltra is therefore layered. There is the documented program. There is the emotional reaction. And there is the fictional expansion. Each influences how new generations understand the past. For some, MKUltra represents a cautionary tale about government overreach. For others, it becomes evidence that hidden manipulation is ongoing everywhere. For many, it simply lingers as a disturbing historical curiosity. But its cultural imprint remains strong because it touches something fundamental: the fear of losing autonomy, the fear that thoughts are not entirely our own, that influence operates invisibly, that authority might reach further than acknowledged. These fears are not new. They existed long before the Cold War. But MKUltra gave them a modern reference point, a documented example of experimentation that blurred ethical boundaries. That reality anchors imagination. In art and entertainment, mind control became a recurring theme. Stories explored how identity could be fractured or rewritten. Characters struggled to determine what was authentic and what was implanted. Such narratives resonate because identity feels personal and sacred. To imagine it altered without consent is deeply unsettling. At the same time, cultural exploration can distort proportion. The dramatic power of total mind control makes compelling fiction. But documented MKUltra research did not produce flawless behavioral programming. The myths sometimes outgrew the evidence. And yet, even exaggerated portrayals trace back to a core truth. A program existed. Ethical lines were crossed. Secrecy shielded it for years. That foundation sustains the legend. In the digital age, the legacy has evolved further. Online communities revisit MKUltra as part of larger discussions about surveillance, influence, and information control. Social media accelerates reinterpretation. Fragments of truth circulate alongside speculation. Distinguishing between them requires careful analysis. But the endurance of MKUltra in cultural discourse reveals how powerful historical secrecy can be. Once revealed, it does not simply close. It echoes. It shapes narratives. It colors perception. It influences how future programs are viewed. Perhaps the most significant cultural impact is skepticism. Healthy skepticism can strengthen democracy. It encourages transparency. It motivates investigative reporting. It demands accountability. But unchecked suspicion can also erode cohesion. The balance is delicate. MKUltra's cultural legacy therefore operates on two levels. It reminds society to question authority, and it demonstrates how secrecy can permanently alter public confidence. The media did not create MKUltra, but it ensured the program would not vanish quietly. Through books, documentaries, and what we still don't know. Even after investigations, public hearings, and decades of analysis, Project MKUltra remains a story with missing pages. Not missing because no one asked questions, but missing because the evidence itself was reduced. In 1973, as scrutiny began tightening around intelligence activities, large portions of MKUltra documentation were intentionally destroyed. Authorizations, internal communications, progress reports, eliminated before full external review could take place. What survived did so partly by accident. Financial records stored in separate archives. Budget trails that investigators later uncovered. Fragments that were never meant to tell the full story, but did. From those fragments, historians reconstructed much of what we now understand. But reconstruction is not the same as transparency. And that distinction matters. We know MKUltra involved numerous subprojects. We know it spanned years. We know it included experimentation that crossed ethical boundaries. But we do not know the complete scale. Exactly how many individuals were involved. How many institutions participated knowingly. How many researchers understood the intelligence connection behind their funding. These questions do not always have precise answers. And when answers are imprecise, interpretation becomes vulnerable. Some argue the program was chaotic and largely ineffective. Others suggest it was more extensive than surviving records show. Without comprehensive documentation, certainty remains limited. It is important to resist filling those gaps with dramatic speculation unsupported by evidence. But it is equally important not to pretend the gaps do not exist, because they shape how history is remembered. Destroyed files do more than conceal actions. They reshape narrative. They determine which stories can be verified, which victims can prove involvement, which decisions can be traced directly to individuals. For some survivors, this incompleteness creates a second layer of harm. Imagine believing you were involved in something unethical, learning that documentation once existed, then discovering it was destroyed. The absence becomes personal. Without records, legal cases weaken. Public acknowledgement becomes harder. Validation becomes conditional. Accountability depends on evidence. Evidence depends on preservation. When preservation fails, intentionally or otherwise, accountability becomes partial. There is also the institutional dimension. After exposure, reforms followed. Oversight committees strengthened. Ethical standards in research became more formalized. Transparency requirements expanded. But how deeply did those reforms penetrate intelligence culture? Did exposure permanently alter operational thinking? Or did it simply refine methods of secrecy? We cannot fully access every internal review that followed. We cannot read every internal debate about lessons learned. Institutions evolve quietly. Policies change language. Procedures become more structured. But culture, the unwritten norms guiding behavior, is harder to measure. Another unknown involves long-term psychological impact, not only on victims, but on society. How much did MKUltra contribute to growing distrust in institutions during the 1970s? How much did it influence broader skepticism toward government transparency? Public trust is not a measurable chemical reaction. It erodes gradually, and programs revealed decades after their inception can amplify cynicism far beyond their original scale. MKUltra became a reference point. Whenever new allegations of secrecy arise, the past resurfaces. Remember what happened before. This cultural memory shapes perception of future programs, even when circumstances differ. What we still don't know is not always about hidden experiments. Sometimes it is about influence. How deeply did MKUltra shape public imagination? How much did it alter the relationship between citizens and institutions? Those effects cannot be fully quantified. There are also operational questions that may never receive definitive answers. Were certain subprojects more experimental than surviving files suggest? Were their initiatives discontinued before